Listen, cutie, don't get nervous just because you read a book. You're as dumb as you ever were.
Oh, you think so, huh?
Yeah, but I don't mind. You know why? Because you're the greatest.
Oh, leave me alone, Harry.
Come here.
No!
I've never seen you like this.
I've never felt like this. I feel like I want to go away somewhere.
Where?
I don't know.
We'll wind up here in a couple weeks. We'll go to Florida, maybe.
I mean alone.
You know what I think? I think you've gone nuts.
Maybe.
All right, calm down.
I can't.
Why not?
I don't know. I just know I hate my life. There's a better kind. I know it. And if you read some of these books, you'd know it too. Maybe it's right what you say. I'm still dumb. But I know one thing I never knew before. There's a better kind of life than the one I got. Or you. Welcome to Your Pick, a film podcast. I'm Geneva.
And I'm Tatum.
We are two friends who love movies and love sharing them with each other. Each week, we take turns picking a film that is close to our hearts and talk about why it moves us, to tears, to laughter, and everything in between. We celebrate the craft of filmmaking, as well as the unique and personal ways we find meaning in the movies we watch. All right, Tatum, what have you been watching this week?
I have not watched much, but I will say I watched a comfort movie of mine, which probably isn't a comfort movie for everyone. But I rewatched The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and it was incredible. It was a very good time, as always. But I will say, you know, I have no idea how many times I've seen these movies. It's honestly probably more than 50, but just for lack of a better, I'll just say 56. So upon my 56th rewatch of this movie, I think I've determined that this might be my favorite of the three.
Ooh.
Which was a whole new revelation for me yesterday. I was like, this is so interesting. Why have I never thought this before?
Did you previously think it was a different one, or did you just previously think, there's no way I can pick a favorite?
I mean, it's changed. I remember when I was younger and I first saw them, it was Return of the King. And then when I got older, it was Fellowship. And it's been Fellowship consistently for a while. And then watching The Two Towers yesterday, I was like, no, this movie's really good, because the way that it kind of transitions from the first movie, which is an introduction, to the final movie, which is like the climax of all of the setup, it's really this beautiful in between that brings us from one place to the other in such a like cohesive way that's also just so concise and clear. And we really start to establish the stakes. We're introduced to the kingdom of Rohan, the kingdom of Gondor. We're introduced to all these different cities, and Gollum becomes a main character, and the Fellowship is kind of breaking up, and everyone has their own different journeys. Then when you got Isengard, and, you know, it's just, you're learning about all of these new things, and you're really getting to meet all of these new characters, and the world is becoming more developed, and the pacing is so good. The structure of it is amazing. It looks great. Obviously, Helm's Deep is the best battle scene ever captured on camera for any cinema ever. So yeah, I really enjoyed it this time around, and I was like, dang, this movie is like really, really, really good. I mean, obviously I've known that for forever, but this was just like a whole new level of appreciation this time. So it was great. I watched it with a friend. We had a fun time. And I love it. It was exactly what I wanted to do with my Saturday. And the whole time I was like, this movie is 4 hours and I don't want it to be over. It's so good. It's just so good.
I love that. I love that for you. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great. I had a blast. So yeah, that's what I watched this week.
Nice. And honestly, I think I agree with you that Two Towers is my favorite as well. I love the kingdom of Gondor and Rohan, and like, just they're so interesting to me, and I love everything that those characters add. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Two Towers, it's great.
The horse lords are cool. I want to be a horse lord.
Horse lords are so cool.
I want to be a horse lord. I want to be part of the Rohirrim. I want all of that. And
yes,
someday it will come true for me.
Now, question for you, because when I watch The Lord of the Rings, I tend to, watch them in a short period of time. And so I do sometimes get events mixed up in my head. Is the beacons are lit, Gondor calls for aid. Is that in Two Towers or is that in
No,
Return of the King?
That's Return of the King.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, in the Two Towers, you know, obviously we're introduced to the Ents, which is a whole new concept that we haven't seen before. And then we have the elves coming to rebuild the alliances of old and all of these. It's so good. it just the way that it's able to handle all of these different dynamics and people and cultures, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
They're the best movies ever made. So fight me. Anyway. What have you been watching?
What have I been watching? 3 things to report this week. So I'll start with the worst.
I saw you watched Argyle. I was like, what the? Why did you go see that movie?
I went with my roommate. My roommate was kind of interested in it. And I was like, oh, you know, if you're going, I'll go with you. You know, kind of curious. It was pretty bad. I mean, I had an enjoyable time, but it's not very good. It has the building blocks. It's one of those frustrating movies where it has the building blocks of a good movie. It has a great cast for the most part.
Can Dua Lipa act?
No, she cannot. But she's only in like 2 minutes of the movie. I have no idea where she's on all the posters. Her part is very, very limited. Okay. But Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell are the main actors, and I enjoy them. I think they're great. And then there's a bunch of secondary people who are also great. The plot is kind of, I mean, it's sort of Romancing the Stone meets James Bond, kind of. It's not terrible, but it's just not a very well put together movie. There are a couple action sequences that are fun. I mean, you know, Matthew Vaughn did the Kingsman movies, and he's very much a stylist. And he has some interesting ideas for a couple of those, but yeah, for the most part, it's just, you want it to be better. Everything looks very fake. The plot is very confusing in ways that it really does not need to be. There's definitely one too many action set pieces where you think the movie's going to end and then it just doesn't. The chemistry of the characters never really gels all that well. Nothing feels really real. So yeah, I mean,
sounds bad.
It's bad. Yeah, it's definitely bad. Henry Cavill, I like sometimes, but I don't think he's very good here, and it doesn't help that they give him the worst haircut and costumes known to mankind. It's absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was Argyle. Then 2 other movies that I liked a bit better. So first I saw 42, which is the biopic of Jackie Robinson starring Chadwick Boseman. This for me it's kind of a by the numbers biopic. I thought the script had some weaknesses, but it definitely is made up for by how good Chadwick Boseman is in this role. I mean, what an incredible talent he is. The story of Jackie Robinson is a really, obviously, you know, fascinating and inspiring one. Again, I think the script kind of lets it down in certain ways. I feel like we never really get to know him. There's so much focus on everything that's going on around him that we don't really get much chance to live with him as a character, and kind of apart from a couple of really, you know, incredibly acted scenes, we don't really live with his sort of emotional journey throughout all of this as much as I would have liked. But again, Chadwick Boseman is fantastic. Nicole Beharie as his wife is playing, you know, the wife character in a biopic is often a very like formulaic kind of just nice supporting, doesn't get much to do. And that's really what the script is here. But I think Nicole Beharie is really wonderful. She adds so much warmth. Her facial expressions in certain scenes while she's watching him play are so incredibly charming and endearing. And I really wish there was kind of more of them just getting to live together and just be kind of a real couple, and, you know, getting to see their daily lives throughout this film. I also really enjoyed, I think there's a little bit too much Harrison Ford, but I enjoyed what we got because he's doing a voice in a way that Harrison Ford does not often do. And that was pretty entertaining. But so yeah, it's definitely worth watching. It's a fascinating story. It's a, important piece of history. I'd say as a movie, it's only so-so, but I would recommend if you're interested in learning more about the story. And then finally, go ahead.
I saw that movie a few years ago. I think I saw it pretty soon after it came out. I remember really liking it, but I haven't seen it since then. But I remember after I watched it, I remember I had seen a lot of things with Chadwick Boseman in it. Like I'd seen 42, I'd seen Get On Up, and then, you know, he went on to be in, you know, Da 5 Bloods and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and all those things. But even before Da 5 Bloods and all of that, I remember being so mad when he was in Black Panther and everyone was like, who's this Chadwick Boseman? I'm like, guys, he's been here for years and he's been giving incredible performances for years. But now that he's in a Marvel movie, everyone's like, who's this guy? I'm like, what the? No. So I remember being upset by that. But I'm glad that you saw this movie to kind of, I don't know. Have you seen him in anything else other than him in Marvel movies?
I feel like I must have, but I can't think off the top of my head.
Yeah, because if you haven't, I'm glad that you were able to see him perform in something outside of that world because he's very talented. I mean,
he's great in the Marvel movies.
Yeah. I'm not diminishing his performance in those movies, but you know, I like it when people see things outside of that.
Yeah, definitely. But definitely the Marvel movies were the first thing that I had seen him in. I can't think off the top of my head what else I've seen with him, but yeah.
I really like Jackie Robinson a lot. My granddaddy actually, my granddaddy is a Dodgers fan specifically because Jackie Robinson was on that team, because my granddaddy's not from, you know, that area, but because of Jackie Robinson, he now loves the Dodgers.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah,
it was funny.
I remember liking that movie a lot.
Yeah, it's funny as someone from Philadelphia, the Phillies, and specifically the Phillies manager, is like the main villain of this, at least a portion of this movie. I was like, oh gosh,
yeah,
shame from my hometown. Anyway, the last thing that I saw this week is a movie called Glory from 1989. Classic, yes. Classic Civil War film. Honestly, I've not really seen a whole lot of films set in the Civil War. This, directed by Edward Zick, I believe, Matthew Broderick, Denzel Washington. I think it was Andre Braugher's first film. Am I wrong about that? Or at least it was very early in his career. Mm-hmm. R.I.P. to Andre Braugher. And I really, really liked this movie. I think there are definitely things about it that would be changed if it was made today. There would probably be a little less focus on the Matthew Broderick character and more focus on the individual members of the Black Battalion that is being formed. But as it is, I think the film does a very good job of bringing forth those characters and showing kind of the variety and the intensity of what they went through and the varying motivations for why they decided to fight, the various sort of backgrounds that they came from. And it's just a really interesting piece of history, and all of the performances are excellent. I think the film is very well directed as well. You know, that sort of epic, sweeping war film that we don't get a whole lot of nowadays. And yeah, I really enjoyed this film. I'm surprised that it took me this long to see it. But I'm glad that I finally did. Man, Denzel Washington, like, just what an unbelievable. I'm also watching Training Day. I have not yet finished Training Day because I've kind of been watching.
Just do a Denzel Washington binge. I mean, he's so he's incredible.
He just leaps off the screen. His charisma is just out of this world. You know, it's like truly once in a generation, like, charisma.
Training Day, in my opinion, is not particularly a very good movie. Like, it's fine, but Denzel Washington just elevates it to so another compelling. Like, a lesser, if there had been a lesser actor playing that role, I would have been like, okay, this movie's like whatever, it's fine.
Yeah,
but
it's entirely built.
Yeah,
at least so far, because I'm only about halfway through. It is entirely built around him being such a compelling figure that even all the insane things that he does and says, you're just like, yeah, I'm with you. Like, what's next? Let's keep going. Please
give me a call when you finish the movie, because his performance in the latter half of that movie,
ooh,
bless him. All right. Yeah,
all right.
It's great. I mean, he won the Oscar for a reason, you know?
Yeah, well deserved from from what I have seen so far.
I think
it is funny because I do,
it might be
I
his
like.
first and only win. Actually, he's been nominated a bunch, but I think that might be his only win.
Really?
I think so.
Really surprising to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I like Ethan Hawke as an actor fine, but it is funny how he's just kind of like, he's just kind of there.
Yeah, he's this little
It's all
cop
Denzel.
trying to be good.
Yep. Accidentally smoking some PCP.
We've all been there, am I right?
We've all been there. All right. Anyway, so that's what I watched this week.
Yeah, let me know. Seriously, let me know when you finish Training Day.
Yeah, sure, will do. Yeah. Have you seen Glory, by the way? Do you have any thoughts on Glory?
I have seen Glory, but I probably haven't seen it in over 10 years. It's been a while.
Okay.
But I remember watching it. And I mean, I grew up in a family where we like worshipped Denzel Washington. So I feel like I just remember really liking his performance.
Yeah, he's great.
And I remember the costumes being cool, but I don't really remember. I mean, I know the story, obviously, but the movie in particular, I don't really remember much about like my thoughts on it. So
yeah.
Yeah, I should probably rewatch it again at some point, but
yeah, in my opinion, it's worth the watch.
Yeah, too many movies, not enough time.
Too many movies, not enough time. All right, so speaking of which, let us move on to the movie we're talking about today. So today on the show, we are discussing the 1950 film Born Yesterday, directed by George Cukor and starring Judy Holliday, William Holden, and Broderick Crawford. So, Born Yesterday started its life as a play by Garson Kanin, which premiered on Broadway in 1946 and starred an up-and-coming actress named Judy Holliday. The play ended up being a big success, eventually running for over 1,600 performances. Audiences and critics alike loved Holliday's performance. However, when Columbia Pictures decided to make a film adaptation, initially the studio head, Harry Cohn, passed over Holliday, calling her, quote, that fat Jewish broad. Yeah, so surprise, surprise, a studio head from Golden Age of Hollywood was a huge jerk. So Cohn wanted
First
to
of all, I don't even like using this word, but being, quote, fat is not a problem. But also,
nope,
she's very tiny.
Yes.
So he's wrong on both fronts.
Yes.
Also, what's wrong with her being Jewish?
The prejudice and the anti-Semitism and the just all around, like, women could only conform to certain extremely, Anglo-Saxon, like, strict beauty standards of this time and of our time too. Like, this is kind of why we are where we are. Anyway,
because of the white men in power for the last couple centuries.
Anyway. So yeah, Cohn, he wanted to cast someone with more star power. Rita Hayworth apparently was considered. Part of the credit for Holliday's eventual casting in the film version of Born Yesterday actually goes to Katharine Hepburn. I found this kind of interesting. Around this time, Katharine Hepburn was making a comedy called Adam's Rib, and the writer of Adam's Rib was none other than Garson Kanin, the man who'd written Born Yesterday. Hoping to show Columbia Pictures how well Holliday could do on screen, Kanin wrote a special role for her, and he and Hepburn worked together to make sure that she was cast in it and that her scenes showed off what she could do. I read something online that talked about how apparently Katharine Hepburn would just basically, like, when she had a scene with Judy Holliday, and she would just basically blow her own takes when they were doing coverage of Katharine Hepburn, which forced them to use more coverage of Judy Holliday and get her on screen more, which is awesome.
I love Katharine Hepburn. Why do we not have a movie about her yet? Like,
right? Let's
have a really good biopic about Katharine Hepburn. What the heck?
Yeah. Cast Cate Blanchett again.
Oh, so good.
So as hoped, Adam's Rib was a success. Judy Holliday in particular was singled out for her work, and Harry Cohn agreed to cast her in Born Yesterday. Judy Holliday received glowing reviews for her performance in the film, and she ended up winning the Oscar. This is probably today what this film is most known for, but we're going to talk a little bit more about that later.
A lot of people are upset that she won, I think. I don't know who she was competing against, but
we will talk about that. So I just have a little bracket for various interesting facts about Judy Holliday's life. I find Judy Holliday really interesting. She had her career in Hollywood was very limited. She actually died very young. I think she was only in her maybe early 40s. She died of cancer. But she kind of had this interesting intersection, like her life sort of wove into the lives of various performers in and around New York at this time. She came up in this nightclub act called The Reviewers, which was two of the other reviewers were Adolph Green and Betty Comden, who wrote Singin' in the Rain. Singin' in the Rain, the character of Lena Lamont, was at least partially based on Judy Holliday's performance as Billy Dawn. And I'm not quite sure why they didn't just cast Judy Holliday to play Lena Lamont. From what I've read, it seems like maybe because this was right post Born Yesterday, she was seen as too famous now, and so they cast Jean Hagen instead. Jean Hagen had taken over for Judy Holliday on stage as Billy Dawn in Born Yesterday. So fun little, like, intersection of things. Judy Holliday was also married, like her first marriage, I believe, was to a musician named David Oppenheim, who was a friend and lover of Leonard Bernstein. He's played in the movie Maestro by Matt Bomer. He's kind of a semi-prominent character in that film. Too bad we didn't learn a little bit more about his character and also Judy Holliday in the film Maestro, which does not have a whole lot of interest in Leonard Bernstein's actual career. But anyway.
Shots fired.
Fun little facts there. Anyway, sorry, that's just a little tangent.
Can I ask a question? I could.
Mm-hmm.
So is this the year that? So did Billie Holiday win over not Katharine Hepburn? Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. Is this that year or no?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no. Yes. That's
Okay.
another year.
Gotcha.
Yeah. This is still a significant year for the Best Actress race.
Okay.
But yeah, I figure we can talk more about that when we get to the Oscar part, because that's kind of important to the film. Okay. So the script for this film, Born Yesterday, required some adaptations from the play. Due to the production code, the idea that Billy and Harry were sleeping together had to be made a little less explicit. The film was also shot partially on location in Washington, D.C., which allowed for scenes where Billy and Paul visit the national monuments and museums. George Cukor, the director of Born Yesterday, was known as a first-rate woman's director because of the way he excelled at working with actresses and helping them achieve great performances. While preparing to shoot Born Yesterday, he had the entire cast rehearse and perform the script for live audiences to get a feel for how to maximize the comedy. So even though the Judy Holliday, I think, is I shouldn't say she's the only one who carried over the role from the stage show. Definitely the Broderick Crawford, who plays Harry, and then William Holden, who plays Paul, were not in the stage production. They were like Hollywood actors who were cast in the role, but he kind of had them rehearse together as if it was a stage production to get, the timing and the comedy right. So anyway, yeah, that is Born Yesterday. So this film is one that I grew up with. It's one of the many old Hollywood films that my uncle showed me and my brothers when I was growing up, and I kind of fell in love with it right away. It was just so funny to me, so charming. I absolutely love Judy Holliday's performance. The sort of political angles, the political idealism, very, very like immediately post World War II. Here are the great things about our government. It's been bogged down by corruption, but it could be better. And, we need to look back to the ideals of the founders. I just find that incredibly charming. And, it's very much not of our time. It's very looks very naive from a 21st century standpoint. But I still think there are things in there that are, it's a nice ideal to have. I find this movie refreshing to watch, especially around in election years, because it's like, oh, here's what we could have. We don't, but it would be nice, And then just the whole subplot about the main plot. The whole plot about
of the movie.
Yeah. The plot about the idea of education and how reading and learning about, what goes on in the world, about history, about society, how it broadens you and helps you to realize, to know yourself better and to know what you want out of life more. I just find very truthful and very, it makes a beautiful case for not staying within your own sort of narrow confines, but expanding your worldview. And this movie, in some ways, it's sort of the 1950s version of Legally Blonde, but I like that the focus is more on her journey and her kind of, she's always an an intelligent woman, but she's been in this sort of confined space for so long where she's been allowed to kind of rest on her heels and be sort of willfully ignorant, and being pushed to look beyond that, realizing that she has the capability and the interest in doing that, and that her, you know, her moral foundation kind of takes over and allows her to get out of the situation that she's in, which is, you know, really toxic, and is enabling this toxic, horrible man who's everything that's wrong with this country. I just find that such a compelling story. So yeah, that's Born Yesterday. I think this was your first time watching it, right? So what were your thoughts?
Yes, this was my first time watching this movie. I am a very big George Cukor fan. Cukor, however you say it.
I say Cukor, but I don't necessarily know if that's correct.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his. I love Philadelphia Story. I really like his adaptation of A Star Is Born. I like his Little Women. You know, not a huge fan of My Fair Lady. And I haven't seen Gone with the Wind in a really long time, but obviously it's highly, highly revered. So yeah, I am a big fan of his. This was my first time watching this movie. This movie's not for me, I must say. I really, really do like Judy Holliday's performance a lot. I think it's very, very good. I think she has little subtle changes throughout the movie where, you know, in the beginning, she's very, very, the way that she speaks is so slurred and so high pitched. And obviously she wants to better her speech. And by the end of the movie, she's not, you know, talking very like that much different from how she was in the beginning, but there are little slight changes. And I think that she just does a really, really good job in this film. Again, we're going to talk about this. I don't know who she was competing against this year. But just from watching this as it is, I think that I'm not surprised that she won Best Actress. I think her performance is amazing. That being said, this movie it felt very, very long to me, and it's only an hour and 45 minutes. And I think the reason it felt long is because it felt very repetitive, and it took a long time to kind of start moving forward. I found myself thinking, okay, I get it. You know, she's reading. She's getting smarter. Cool. What's next? Okay. Harry's yelling at her again. He's angry. Okay. Like, it just felt very drawn out in terms of certain things where I understood them. And I was like, I get it. Can we move past this? Can we move on? Not move on, but just like, can we develop this any further? Can we raise the stakes a little bit? Can we progress a little bit more? But it felt like it was very much so stuck in this lane of the same plot line for about 45 minutes of the movie in the middle. And I think that the plot points are very interesting, but it lingers on them too long, in my opinion. I like the ending a lot, where it finally comes to this, you know, confrontation of Billy with Harry, and then Paul is there, and you learn like, oh, they're trying to, you know, basically report him to the newspapers and, you know, reveal that he's a mobster and all of this corruption, and he's in cahoots with the politicians, and you know, Billy's kind of standing up for herself. And I really, really love the ending to this movie. But I think it just took way too long to get there. So yeah, and like nothing else about the movie really stood out to me. Like, I wasn't really impressed by, you know, the way it was shot or the way it looked or the costumes or anything like that. It just felt very, just middle of the road sounds really harsh. I don't think this is a middle of the road movie. I think it's very well made, but there wasn't anything that really, really like stood out to me. It just kind of felt like there's a camera here and it's filming people while they do stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely not flashily directed. It's not a sort of like a movie where like the shadows and the framing and the editing and stuff are the focus. Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily unique for George Cukor, however you say it. Like, Philadelphia Story is kind of a similar thing of, we'll put a camera here and we'll film people. But I love that movie because I feel like the dialogue is really, really riveting and I'm very invested in the characters. Whereas this, I felt like it was kind of beating a dead horse of like, I understand who these people are. I understand where this is going. How much longer is it going to take for us to get there? So, yeah, like, again, I don't think it's a bad movie. I understand why people really like it, but for me, it was just something where I was like, I was bored. So yeah, but I'm really interested to talk more and hear your thoughts on it because, you know, I do understand what you're saying. I do think that the storyline here is very empowering towards women. And I do like the commentary that it makes about, you know, the elite and how selfish and terrible they can be. I absolutely hate the character of Harry. I think he's a terrible person. And they pretty much established that from the first second of this film that he sucks. But yeah, I don't know. At the same time, there were certain things that just didn't really grip me. And I do struggle with seeing kind of the glorification of the government of America of like, oh yes, the foundations. I'm like, well, do you know who these men actually were that like wrote the foundations of this and how they were problematic? And, you know, I mean, everyone's problematic, but, you know, America is not, when you get back to the roots, a perfect system. It's always had flaws. But yeah, I don't know. There were things to like here for sure. But I think ultimately the reason why I didn't like it as much as I would have otherwise is because it just felt too long to me. I think if it had been like an hour and 15 minutes, I would have really enjoyed it. But yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess the difference with us is that for me, a lot of those conversations that Billy and Paul are having through the middle, which, you know, there's not a whole lot of action that's happening in the middle. It's mainly them going around to different monuments or to museums or, you know, talking about the books that Billy has been reading and just kind of talking through these new ideas that she's learning. To me, that's a lot of the meat of what this movie is just the kind of sort of semi-philosophical conversations that they're happening and the awakening that you see that's happening with her, where she's starting to actually look critically at her situation and realize, oh, wait, like, who is this person that I've devoted the last 7-8 years of my life to? Like, oh, wait, what do I actually want out of life? You know, like, I love that conversation that they have in, I think it's like they're walking through a museum or something like that, and she's asking him about this quote that she read about how this writer who says, I would rather have been this happy peasant, you know, who lived a quiet life with my wife and my children than to be Napoleon with all his riches and glory who'd caused this untold pain and suffering on all these other people. And Billy's reaction to it is like, well, yeah, of course. Like, who wouldn't rather be the happy peasant than Napoleon? That sounds great. And Paul's response to that is, well, for one thing, Harry, your boyfriend, would not. And at first she's sort of like, what? No, you're what are you talking about? But then he's like, no, like, ask him, like, really think about it, like, in the way that he chooses to live his life and the you know, the ambitions that he has and the choices that he's making. What is it that you think that he's prioritizing? And so that, you know, her kind of starting to realize that she and Harry are not in alignment and that she actually has some very foundational moral qualms against what Harry is doing in a way that previously she just completely intentionally turned a blind eye. You know, I'm getting what I want out of Harry and that's all I need to know. I'm not going to think any further about it. And now she's like, oh no, actually, the more I think about it, the more I realize this is something that I can't abide, you know? So anyway, those are the kinds of, for me, that is the part that really fascinates me about the movie is the kind of back and forth between those two characters and the learning that's happening. But yeah, it's like, it's not really plot heavy. I do love, you know, I do love a scene where two characters are just talking about like, what is the meaning of life? So, which is not necessarily make for riveting cinema.
Yeah. I mean, I can enjoy that in certain movies. It's just sometimes it doesn't work and I can't necessarily put my finger on why. But I will say one thing that I think you will appreciate, hopefully, maybe. I found this to be interesting. So I actually really liked the love story between Billy and Paul in this movie.
Ooh.
Because so in the beginning, when they have their first kiss, I was like, oh, brother, like, here we go. They just met. Here's this beautiful woman. And he's like, wow, I'm going to kiss you, whatever. And I was like, oh, not again. Like, please don't do this to me. But I actually really liked how their relationship evolved from there because I feel like there was a lot that I saw in Billy's character in terms of like, I'm starting to learn and think for myself, what do I want? You know? And so there's kind of this initial naive thing of like, well, maybe I want something else and here's this person. So like, let's try this thing. And then Paul's like, no, like this is not the time to do this. And so I feel like we really see this arc of Billy in terms of, you know, what she wants romantically, where she's like, I just want to try anything different. And then she's like, wait, what actually do I want? Do I want this at all? And then the more she starts to interact with Paul, she's like, oh, wait, I actually really like you. And then she has this moment towards the end where she's like, well, actually, I'm leaving because like maybe this is too much or it's not real and you only like me for my brain, which like, I'm like, girl, that's hot. What are you talking about?
I love it.
But I'm like, that's a good thing. But so seeing her kind of go through that and also Paul go through this thing of him initially being like, no, I'm not going to take advantage of you because you don't know any better. And you're just like wanting to kind of make up for lost time. Like, I don't want to take advantage of that, but kind of slowly developing this relationship over time. So that way by the end, when he does say that he loves her, I believe it. It doesn't feel like this happened in 2 days. And maybe you have a better idea of this, but I was trying to figure out how much time has passed in this movie from beginning to end. Yeah, it feels like it's quite a while, but
yeah,
maybe not.
It's not entirely clear, but it's at least a few months.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So I was like, you know what? I believe this, and I have seen the different steps along the journey that's led them to this kind of final, you know, feeling that they have for each other. And I really appreciated that because I really struggle with love stories in movies of this time period for lots of reasons. And when they had that first kiss in the beginning, I was like, oh, no, please, please no. And it didn't do that, which made that first kiss really interesting in terms of showing what that meant about Billy and her character development. So
yeah.
Good.
I'm really glad that you like the love story because it's one where like I enjoy the relationship, but the love story specifically is not always like the first thing that I think that I go to. And I feel like every time I rewatch this movie, I always worry that Paul's going to come off as too kind of condescending or something like that, which I don't think he really does. I felt like on this rewatch, I picked up, maybe because I had the subtitles on, which I haven't watched with the subtitles on before, the fact that from the very beginning, it's so clear they're both very much physically attracted to each other. Like, she straight up tells him at their first meeting, like, I have a thing for you. You're cute. Like, you know. And so they have that first kiss, but it's very much an impulsive sort of like, oh, we're into each other. But then, you know, after that, Paul is kind of intentionally drawing this line of, no, we're in this weird, complicated situation. Let's just, you know, keep that sort of physical distance so that we can do this thing that, you know, we're supposed to be doing, this sort of educational thing. But then, like you say, through that line that he draws, it allows them to then grow intellectually closer and grow in this sort of emotional intimacy so that by the end, when they finally decide to get together, when they, you know, they kiss again, they eventually in the very last scene we see they get married, you believe it, you know? You believe that they have a full-grown relationship with one another and that they both respect each other.
Yeah, and I think that the movie, I don't know, I think it's it proves how good the movie is at navigating this, the sense that, you know, I was kind of waiting to have this feeling of, okay, of course, there's another dumb, beautiful woman, and the guy's like, oh, like, you know, I'm going to teach her how to be smart. And then through the process of that.
very Pygmalion type.
Yeah, but it wasn't like that. It didn't feel like he was intrigued by this dumb woman and was like, oh, wait a minute, you're actually smart. That's hot. It was very much so like, no, I see you as a person and I think that you're interesting and I really appreciate the way that I'm seeing you grow. And yeah, I don't know. It felt like he had a lot of respect for her in a way that I was not expecting. Yeah. And obviously, you know, that the way that he treats her and the way that he respects her and the way that he talks to her when he's teaching her things is always such a contrast to Harry. Like, we get that scene maybe 2/3 of the way through the film where they're just sitting around at Billy's apartment and she's got like books absolutely everywhere, which I'm like, Billy, have you read all of those? Like, that's really impressive.
But they're just having this conversation about whatever she's been reading recently. And then Harry comes in and he's just like, oh, no, go ahead. I'm just going to watch. But then he cannot stop. Like, she gets one fact wrong and then he's like belittling her for it. He's like, ha, you didn't know that London was a city in England. You're so stupid. And then she's like, well, who's Tom Paine if you're so smart? And the fact that Harry doesn't know that makes him so insecure.
Well, he's like, if I wanted to know, I would know. I just don't know it because I don't care to know it.
Yeah. His insecurities are just so close to the surface, and Harry has no way to relate to Billy except in belittling her or showing himself to be better than her, smarter than her, whatever it is. And it's such a contrast with the way that Paul treats her. It's not a surprise that at a certain point she starts to realize, like, I've been allowing myself to, be treated in this really dehumanizing way. Like, that's the situation that I've been willing to put myself in for these past 8 years. I need to respect myself and to get out and to find something that a situation that is actually good for me,
Mm-hmm. So I have a comment and then a question. My comment is, my favorite aspect of this entire movie, which happens pretty early on in the beginning, and I genuinely loved it, is the whole thing of Billy, what? She was like, what?
I watched this with my roommate, and that was her favorite as well.
So
she
good.
Cracked up the first time they did it. It's so funny.
It's so funny, and I love that it happens so many times. You really get this idea that they've had the same interactions every single day for years.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Just like, Billy, what? Shut up.
Yeah. It is crazy to me that Broderick Crawford did not star with Judy Holliday on Broadway, in this role, because that he was just cast for the movie, because their chemistry, and especially, so my favorite scene in the entire movie, and it's not because it's like, represents something about the movie as a whole, it's just purely because of the performances, is the scene where the two of them sit down and play gin rummy, and it's like a 5-minute scene.
It's so long.
It is so long, but I find it so gripping because their performances are so good and it tells you so much about their characters. And just the naturalness with which they interact, like, to me, I just get this sense of, like, I fully believe these two people have had this exact same nightly ritual every night for the past 8 years. Like, they know each other so well, and they always do the same thing. She always beats the pants off of him. He always cheats on the points. She has this elaborate way of sorting her cards that he just, like, can't stop staring at. It's incredible, which, like, a great little character detail, because it's like, this is before Billy has really started to blossom under Paul's tutelage, but you get a sense from early on there's a lot of untapped, like, intelligence, and one of the few ways that she gets to show it is by playing gin rummy, because she is so good at, like, analyzing the game and sorting her cards and beating the pants off of Harry every single night. Anyway, I don't even remember where I was going with that point. I just wanted to talk about how much I love that scene, just because of how good their chemistry is with each other.
Yeah, I liked that scene too, but also, again, it overstood its welcome for me. There's so many things about this movie where it's like, I like this. Mm-hmm. This section is too long.
Yeah. I guess actually where I was going with that too, just in their slight side point, but like with the whole Billy, what? is... I know you said that you didn't find the, like, production design to be too remarkable, but I actually really love the, like, hotel wing that they're in, and the layout of it and the design of it. I think it's really, I mean, I have no idea what the stage set looked like, but, it's like this 3-dimensional thing that we're going in and out of, and the placement of certain things are really important for the way that the blocking happens, or the way the characters can kind of sneak in and out of each other's apartments. Like, I think it's really, really well designed. And, like, part of it is the fact that those two windows look out over each other, and that allows them to do the, like, shouting across all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. I think my response to that is that, like, quite honestly, I was so bored with this movie that, like, I started looking at other things while the movie was playing, so I wasn't necessarily watching as closely to look at, like, what the apartment looked like. So, yeah. So, getting back to, so my question, I do have a question.
Oh, yes.
Because, and this could very well be that I didn't understand it because I wasn't fully 100% giving this movie my, like, you know, all of my attention. But it seemed like there was some sort of something going on, like Harry was dependent on Billy financially in some way, and that's why he constantly had her signing documents. Like, what did the movie explicitly state what was going on there, and I just didn't get it, or is it a little bit more like, is it not described as much? Because I was confused.
I mean, I don't know that how. Basically, the idea is that in order to keep Harry's hands clean / like to kind of spread out his business, I'm not exactly sure 100% what the reasoning is, but a lot of his properties are actually owned by Billy on paper.
Right, because they keep talking about, you know, you need to marry her because if she leaves you, then she's going to take everything or something like that.
Yeah, like it'll be a big problem for Harry if she ever leaves him because on paper, a lot of these business deals that he's negotiating are actually with Billy as some sort of partner or owner of some of his properties. I'm assuming it's because so many of his deals are shady, and so he wants to, like, you know, lessen his liability by having someone else's name on all of these documents. And he's like, here's my girlfriend who is, you know, very much financially and emotionally dependent on me. You know, I don't see her leaving me. And she's also, you know, too ignorant to read anything that I put in front of her, and so therefore she's like a convenient person to put on all these deals. So yeah, by the end of the film, she has progressed in her learning and her awareness of like the business world and what Harry is up to really to understand, like, actually, if I choose to, I can put him in a really uncomfortable position because I own a lot of what he has on paper. And so that's exactly what she does at the end. She steals the documents that prove kind of the shady business deal he's in town to enact. It seems to be some sort of like he's trying to buy off a congressman to introduce some legislation, I think, that will benefit his business. But then also her whole deal with Harry is basically to make sure that you don't come after me. I'm going to promise to sign back your properties, but I'm only going to do it at a rate of 1 a year, which she says she owns like 126. So he's not getting all those properties back.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not super. I think you basically understood everything that we're meant to understand in the movie. Yeah,
that makes sense. I didn't get the details and the specifics of that, but I think the point came across. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's really intriguing, too, about the character of Harry is this sort of, like you say, the lawyer is constantly telling me, you need to marry Billy, like, to secure everything that you're doing. And also, you know, if you ever get in trouble with the law, wives can't testify against their husbands. And so that's going to doubly make you safe. And his response...
Which is a dumb law, by the way.
Yeah. Is that... I assume that's... I wonder if that's still the law. That's such a, like, important part of so many like Agatha Christie style like 1930s and 40s murder mysteries and things like that. I assume that's still the law, but I don't actually know. Anyway,
have you seen Anatomy of a Fall? I mean,
well, she's not testifying against her husband. She's testifying.
Oh, true.
Yeah. Where was I going with this?
I think you'd made your point. I think.
Well, I was talking about like, it's so interesting to me that Harry is like, well, no, I don't want to marry her because I don't want to be tied down. But at the same time, they're like, well, why don't you just leave her behind? Like, don't take her to Washington. And he's like, I love her. And he says multiple times, like, I'm crazy about her. I love that broad. And it's just
I
like,
think it's a power play. He likes feeling like he's in power and has control over this person.
Yeah. I think that's probably true. Like, I'm sure he thinks that he loves her because his definition of love is, well, if she asks for something, I give it to her. You know, I buy her anything that she wants. You know, he can't think any further than that. Like, Harry is such a well-written and I think well-performed character of the, like, this is the archetype of the bully, the gangster, the guy who thinks that by throwing his weight around, he can get at anything he wants. And when he does go a little too far and push around someone who's on his payroll, he's just like, he sort of is like, oh, here, let me like do this thing for you to make you feel better for the fact that I just like shoved you, you know? Like that moment where he like pushes his lawyer, like physically pushes his lawyer, and then his lawyer is looking kind of mad about it, and he's like, "Are you sore? Do you need an aspirin?" Like, what? Like, no, I need you to stop being a jerk. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, I think it's just.
It seems like he's almost delusional in a sense that, you know, when he starts learning that Billy and Paul have feelings for each other or whatever, he's like, why would you choose him over me? And I'm like, well, why wouldn't she? Like, but he genuinely seems to not understand why she would choose to be with Paul instead. And it's like, well, I don't know how to help you there. Like, it seems pretty obvious to me, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And he basically has just enough more learning or more experience with the world than Billy to understand how, you know, how much of a problem Billy is going to be for him moving around in Washington. But he is extremely ignorant and like offensive himself. Like he's constantly stepping over the congressman that he's trying to buy and saying the wrong thing and saying really dumb things all the time. And he doesn't recognize that the exact same, you know, problems that Billy has, he also has himself.
I think it seems to me very clear that Harry has bought all of the relationships that he has, because even the lawyer doesn't seem to like him very much, but he says in the beginning, that's why you pay me $200,000 a year. And I'm like, that's in 1950s money.
I know.
You know, like,
I know.
What is
I
that,
think it's
$500,000 a year?
I think it's $100,000 a year, but that's still like, that's gotta be like $1 million a year in today's, like something ridiculous. Like that is so much money.
It's so much money. So it's like, I don't know. It just seems to be this thing where Harry, he has all of this security because he's paid everyone all this money. And then by the end, he's like, oh, wait a minute. I've messed things up with this Congress person. Billy is leaving me. It seems like his brother or his cousin or something. The guy who's like, what does he keep saying in the beginning? Like, that's right. Or what is he saying?
Oh yeah,
in the beginning?
His like whatever henchman. I don't know if he's like a relative or something like that. When he comes back from looking for Billy, and he's like, no, go out there. You got to go find her. And he's like, sure, I'm just gonna change my socks.
Yeah, you know, it's just, I don't know. It seems like everyone hates him, but because he pays them so much money, he's able to be delusional to tell himself that people actually are around him because they want to be around him. It's like, well, no,
yeah,
it's not actually the case.
Or that he's a good person, or at least not a terrible person because he like pays them adequately. Not adequately, that he pays them generously for the privilege of abusing and beating them up.
Yeah, I mean, even the concierge or whoever, when he shows them the suite and he's pissed because they didn't get the whole floor, you know, he's like screaming at him and yelling at him. And then before the concierge leaves, he's like, here's some cash, you know, and he gives him all this money. And the guy's like, oh, thank you, you know, and it's like he can do whatever he wants and treat people however he wants because he can. I mean, how much money does this guy have? Like, geez, is he a billionaire? Like, what the heck?
Yeah, my roommate was like, he's in the junk business? Isn't that kind of like a legit business? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure the junk business is like a euphemism or like junk plus many other shady things.
Yeah, it's a front for lots of other things. It's very sus.
Yeah. But yeah, he's just like, again, with I think the writing is very strong and that Broderick Crawford's performance is very strong. It's just, he's such a lived-in character to me. I'm like, yep, this is the exact type of guy that, you know, we have with us today. And his sort of like, he can't conceive of any sort of framework for living that does not revolve around accumulating money and power. He can't conceive of any possibility for a relationship with someone that does not involve transactions. He always has to be the smartest and the strongest and the most powerful. And, you know, if anything indicates that he's not, then he just absolutely goes to pieces. And yep, real, you know, real person, real relatable
person
type. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, actually, we should talk. I kind of wanted to talk for a minute, too, about, related to Harry, the character of Jim, the lawyer, just because he kind of stuck out for me on this rewatch. And again, like a real the sort of archetype that you can really see existing in the world. This person who like had all of this intellectual promise. Like, they say that he's a really good lawyer, and he could have been, you know, he could have been a high up politician. He could have had power. He could have done real good with the things that he has. And instead he's thrown in his lot with this gangster who pays him a lot of money, but he's basically at the price of his whole soul. And so he's just this sort of alcoholic who hangs around and, you know, bullies Billy into signing papers whenever he needs to, and is kind of exists at the beck and call of Harry to kind of clean up his messes, and just drinks to cope with the misery of, you know, knowing what he is and who he works for. Like, he's so, it's like he's a tragic figure, but at the same time, like Billy says, like, I don't know who's worse, honestly. you know that what you're doing is wrong, and yet you're still doing it.
Yeah. I don't particularly have the thoughts about him, so.
Let's see. What else should we talk about?
I mean, I feel like we haven't talked about Paul that much, if you want to talk about him.
Yeah, let's talk about Paul. Do you have any initial thoughts just to start off?
Not particularly, but I just wanted to create space for it if you wanted to talk about him.
Yeah, to me, he's like, you know, I like the character, I like the performance, I like his relationship with Billy. He's probably the least interesting character to me, just because, you know, it's more about what he represents and what he's teaching Billy than kind of him in himself. I do kind of love the fact that, I don't know what this means. When Harry first proposes this idea that he's going to teach Billy how to be smart, Paul's like, no, I don't think that's right for me. And then he's like, I'll pay you $200 a week. And Paul's like, okay.
Yep.
Which, like, I guess he's not immune to the lure of money. But I mean, he's a newspaper man. You know, how much can he actually be making? Right. And probably this would provide helpful information for the story that he's writing on Harry. But,
yeah, maybe that's his initial angle of like, well, you're going to pay me and I can like learn more about you. So why not?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like I said before, too, I feel like this time more than most, I picked up on the fact that he's initially, right from the start, really attracted to Billy, and really, like, when she says to him, like, you're cute, I've got a yen for you, he's like blushing. It's kind of adorable. He's like, oh, I this isn't what I expected our conversation to be like. I'm not quite sure what to do, which I find really cute. But yeah, like I said, I don't find him interesting so much as I do kind of what he represents to the story. He's kind of this embodiment of this sort of like idealistic, like educated sort of, I see the ideals of America and I want to make my country better. I want, you know, for people to understand and think deeper about what they're the society around them or the way that they're living their lives. Yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts about Paul?
Well, while you were speaking, I just had this thought of, obviously these movies have had other storylines attached to them, but I think this is the third movie now that you've chosen where there is a male character who finds a woman who needs help becoming more educated, and he steps in and is like, let me show you the way, because the Oxbow incident has that. And then
where is that in the Oxbow incident?
Isn't that the one where he's like, well, sure, I'll teach you how to read? Isn't that the Oxbow incident?
No, there must be something else that we did, but I'm trying to think of what it is.
Oh, no, it's the one where he's like a politician.
The man who shot Liberty Valance.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
The man who shot Liberty Valance. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, we have that element in that movie, and then obviously Pygmalion, and then this movie, I'm like,
That's funny. Yeah, interesting little thematic.
We should psychoanalyze that at some point.
I know, we should. I mean, to be fair to me, those are three very different movies and very different relationships. Because, like, Henry Higgins in Pygmalion is not a hero in the way that Paul Verrill is like a heroic character to a certain extent. Like Henry Higgins, the joke is very much on him. You know, he thinks he's so much smarter than Eliza Doolittle, but is he really? Is he? Yeah. You know, he's certainly, you know, he's certainly more educated. He certainly has more like access to the wealth of knowledge of the world, but in terms of how he actually treats people, like he's very much
well, that's what I meant. Like, they're all different. You know, the thing
but that is a funny
it is very different. Like, they're not the same movie by any means, but there is this like one aspect of each that is you know, kind of a similar theme. So.
Well, what can I say? You know, I love learning. I love being a student. I love reading and encouraging other people to learn. I don't know.
Anyway.
And I love movies that are about, like, what is the good life? How do you achieve it?
Yeah. That's now I'm thinking, like, this movie, that'd be an interesting double feature, watching this one and then The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. They're both very similar in terms of their themes and storyline and plot.
It's very ways. Like 1950s, 1960s look at what America means. I mean, Liberty Valance is a more cynical film, I think, than Born Yesterday is. But, you know, they're both coming from a similar cultural place. Certainly.
And one is a Western and the other isn't.
Yeah, also true. Unless you talk about the wilderness of Washington. Oh, man. That one line where the lawyer's like, he's kind of talking derisively to Harry, and Harry's like, that's congressman you bought me is not working out at all. You need to buy me a senator. And he's like, oh, Harry, like, now when are you going to learn that most of our congressmen and senators are just good, honest, sincere men trying to do a job, you know, just a few rotten apples. And I was like, ha 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 ha.
Yeah,
right. If only we still lived in a time when you could even think that. Not that it was true then, but
people thought that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, it is so fascinating going back as if in a time capsule to like a pre-Watergate, pre-Vietnam view of the United States. You know, we had just gotten through World War II at this time when, you know, we were fighting the Nazis, who were very clearly the bad guys, and we were the good guys. And so we could still kind of clap ourselves on the back and be like, yes, you know, our continuing experiment with liberty, and we're working toward the ideals of our founders. And, you know, it was a more pure time that, not a more pure time. It was a time when
ignorance is bliss, baby.
Yeah, like those ideals made more sense, and we had not been forced to confront certain hard truths about ourselves, you know. Yeah. Let's see. I did want to just appreciate again with like how much I enjoyed the performances in this movie. That scene early on where they have the congressman and his wife over to the apartment, and Billy is just so awkward and uncomfortable and doesn't know how to act, and like so resentful.
They're telling her, they're like, don't say anything, and then she doesn't say anything, and then very clearly when she's silent, they're like, you're supposed to say something. Yeah. Then she opens her mouth and they're like, no, wait.
The wrong thing comes out. like the, you know, oh, have you seen the Supreme Court yet? No. What is it? They're like, what? The whole thing about how like the congresswoman's wife is trying to be nice, and she like invites her to play bridge, and Billy's like, yeah, I don't know how to play bridge. Like clearly, like, you know, you're not the sort of people that I really would feel comfortable hanging out. And Harry gets so like defensive and like, but you can learn how to play bridge. Like it's just so terrible. The part where Billy is like, she just wants to listen to her like jazz song, and so she keeps turning it on, and Harry keeps turning it off, and then she like brings it out to where the congressman's wife is sitting, and like is just sort of sitting there twiddling her thumbs, and then she puts it on, and then she starts like kind of dancing and like singing under her breath, and they're just looking at her like, what are you doing? It's so funny. Oh my goodness. Just let her vibe, you know, let her sing. And then later when they're playing,
her singing is pretty obnoxious. When they're doing the card game at the table, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like the fact that he's able to even last that long before saying something really kind of proves your point of what you were saying before of like, yeah, he's been in this situation before, and he's like, this is not a hill I'm going to die on. Yeah. But then it crosses a certain threshold, and he's like, shut up.
Da, 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 ba-bum.
Oh, it's so bad. It's so
funny. Bad. Oh my goodness. Like the way that she's able to keep up that shrill voice where it's like, this is clearly her natural, you know, Billie Billy Dawn's natural voice, not Judy Holliday's natural voice, but like, and so even as her grammar starts to improve and her vocabulary starts to improve and she starts to enunciate a little bit better, like, you know, that's just how her voice sounds. That's just how she talks.
Yep.
And the fact that she's able to keep it up for the entire film and somehow make it like, I think, ride a really good line of it is annoying, but it's also kind of endearing, especially toward the end. Like the more she's growing and learning and the more she's willing to call out things that Harry does and the more she's willing to stand up for herself. She's so freaking adorable. Like, I love her so much. And she's still got that squeaky voice, but she's just like, you know, she's not taking it anymore. And I love it.
I think that's another reason why this movie was difficult for me as well, because I was like, you know, I think that I said this before. I think that Judy Holliday's performance in this movie is very, very, very good. I think she's gone all in and it's great. But at the same time, I'm still very annoyed by every single sound that this person makes. Like, the performance is great, but I hate listening to it. Like, I can't, it's not endearing to me. It's just straight up annoying. And so I was hoping that the movie, her voice would change more as it went on, but it stayed basically the same the whole time. And it reached a point when I was like, I can't listen to this anymore. It's so annoying to me. And I also felt like that with Harry as well. I was like, stop shouting. Like, stop. You're driving me crazy. Like, stop it. So again, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, I get the point. And this movie already feels too long, but it also feels longer because I hate the way that both of you speak. And so much of this movie is me having to listen to you speak.
So them shout at each other.
Yeah. So like, I understand why her voice is the way that it is. I think it works well for the movie. But for me, I was like, this is intolerable. Like, I can't do this anymore. And then when she started singing, I was like, oh my, stop. Please stop.
When I was doing research to find some, like, you know, critics' quotes to use for this, I found several who said basically the exact same thing. They're like, I could not handle it.
It's like, no shade to the performance. Like, it works, but for me, it was too much. It was too much.
One sort of aspect of Billy's story that I find really interesting is what she reveals to Paul about her father, and the fact that it's sort of while she's, you know, having these lessons with Paul and is starting to really think critically about where she is in her life. She reaches out to her father for the first time in a really long time. Did you kind of pick up on that sort of aspect of her, like her story and what's going on? That kind of, it's a very small subplot, but did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it was something where it sounded like she grew up and something happened to her mom. Maybe her mom left or died or something.
I think she died when like Billy was a baby, basically.
Yeah, and so her dad basically had to raise her and her siblings from nothing, and he worked really hard, and they didn't have a lot of money and all these things, but he was like a very encouraging father and wanted her to have whatever she wanted. And then she kind of fell into this relationship with Harry, and ever since then she hasn't really talked to him very much. And so it sounded like at this point in the story, she started reflecting a lot more on who he was and how she wants him to be back in her life. And, you know, the sorts of traits and lessons that she could take from the way that she was raised and the work ethic that he established, like as an example for her. So that was kind of what I picked up on. Maybe some of that's not right, or I lost a few things along the way. But I really liked the idea that, which I kind of wish that she'd fully leaned into this, and maybe she'll still go, but I liked this idea at the end where she was like, I'm going to go be with my father for a while. And I was like, yeah, you should do that. And it's like, oh, wait, but you actually got married to Paul instead. I don't know. I feel like you should go stay with your father, but whatever.
Well, maybe they're headed out of town at the end of the
yeah. Like
film,
maybe
so
she'll
hopefully
still
they're
go,
off to go.
But I also was like, I don't know, go be with your dad. Like,
yeah,
like
reconnect with him. He sounds nice. Yeah, no, I think that's all correct. And I don't know. I found it very, very sweet. Like she like clearly had a very hard upbringing, and the Harry seemed to have, I mean, she's 29 in the film. She hasn't seen her father in 8 years, you know, so she was in her early 20s when Harry picked her up. He's clearly a lot older than she is. And it's basically like her father told her when she left, like, I don't want to see you while you're living unethically. You know, he has this sort of moral line that he's drawn. Like, he still cares about her and wants to hear from her, but he has these strong objections to the way that she's been living. And Harry sort of kept her in this, like, and she's kept herself in this situation of, you know, I'm not going to think about the fact that I've just willfully estranged myself from this person who loved me and raised me and, you know, taught me to be a moral person. And I'm just going to kind of live in this bubble, live in this sort of, you know, my life is comfortable and I get everything I want, and therefore I'm not going to think about anything else. And the fact that Paul's influence leads her to reconnect with her roots, to reconnect, like you say, to this person who was clearly really instrumental in the way that she was raised and imparted a lot of really great lessons to her, I think is really beautiful. And there's that one exchange that she has with Harry toward the end. I should have written it down. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like, he's just basically like, she's like, I want more. I want something different out of life. And he's like, what do you like? What do you want? What are you looking for? And she's just basically like, I want the life. Oh, it's so good. She's like, I want what my father had, you know? And Harry's response to that is 25 a week. Like, that's the only way that he can conceive of who her father was and what he means to her is he just made a measly $25 a week. And therefore he, you know, he doesn't matter. Like, it's such a revealing moment, I think, for her and for the audience. Yeah, so I really love that. And like you said, like, the fact that at the end she's like, I'm leaving and I want to go be with my father. And you're like, yes. And then they get married, but hopefully they're going to go still be with her father for a while.
Yeah, so. It's like, okay, I support you, but also don't forget your dad.
Yeah, like please go.
You should still do
yes.
that.
Exactly.
Go rebuild that bridge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. I was trying to think if there are any other like specific scenes or moments that I wanted to talk about.
It's kind of a very simple movie in terms of its
plot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The plot of it is actually extremely simple. There's just like a lot of like little lines and things, but I didn't do a great job of actually writing down lines while I was watching. It's kind of more absorbed in the story itself. Yeah, I don't know. We've talked about so much of it. Are there any other like scenes that you happen to strike you, or moments or lines or anything else that you wanted to mention?
I think that one thing that I'll say is that, again, not to be a broken record, but I'm going to continue talking about this. Something that I've mentioned a lot on this podcast is that I like when movies introduce their characters really well. And I feel like this movie did a very good job of that. From the very beginning, when we see Harry and Billy getting out of this car and they've got all these coats and these bags, and the way that he is treating the, you know, the hotel workers. And it's just, you know, the way that they're walking. Before we even hear them saying all that much, you kind of get an idea immediately of who these people are and where they're coming from and the way that they live and the status that they carry and all of these things. And so I found that to be just very, very well established from the very beginning, which I don't know. I really appreciate that when movies do that super well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Also, just a word of appreciation for, I know you said you also weren't a big fan of the costumes, but I do really enjoy Billy's costumes. I think they do a good job of kind of that transition from her earlier costumes, which are all like completely bedazzled and like
so bedazzled,
so sparkly, so like cheap looking, to what she's wearing later in the film, which is a bit more like sophisticated and elegant, you know. I think they do
like
very
her own personal style, as opposed to this is what I've been told to wear.
Yeah, exactly. I really love that like sort of white, completely bedazzled jumpsuit thing that she's wearing when she meets Paul for the first time. Like,
is that the one where she's got the big gaudy like diamond necklace hanging around her neck, or is that a different? No, I think that was when she met the senator. Never mind.
Yeah. When she meets the senator, I think she's wearing this sort of like black cocktail dress, which is also completely bedazzled and all this jewelry. The jumpsuit, I think there's like a pin, like a diamond pin or something.
Maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also love, it's such a weird looking outfit. Like I would never wear it. I don't necessarily think it looks good, but I love it for some reason. The outfit she's wearing, toward the end, I think it's the one where she and Paul are just kind of hanging out and talking about Thomas Paine, and then Harry, like afterwards she starts arguing with Harry, where she has these like black pants and then this like sort of dirndl, but then it has a huge skirt, but then the skirt doesn't have a front so you can see the pants. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, I remember what you're talking about.
It's just such a strange looking outfit.
I was confused by it. I was like, wait.
Yeah, it is confusing.
I was like, what is this?
Like, I can't figure out what it exactly
is. Is this a cape? Is this just a thing of fabric that's hanging off? Like, I don't understand.
But I kind of want one, like, just to like wear around the house and like sweep around corners, you know?
How often are you sweeping around corners? Not
a whole lot of corners in my current apartment, unfortunately, but... Anyway, yeah.
I support that for you.
Thank you. Also just her like amazing collection of like cute little jackets and hats and stuff like that. I mean, that's just standard 1950s film fare, but yeah, I love it. Yeah. All right. I guess we could just kind of talk briefly about the whole ending sequence. Oh gosh, because this is such an important thing, is like when Billy is talking to Paul about her father, one thing that she specifically highlights is like, you know, they had this fight, he sort of like, you know, they're estranged, he didn't like the way that, you know, her taking up with Harry, but she says he never hit me, like never once did he ever raise a hand against me. And so when Harry and Billy get into this fight toward the end, and Billy's telling him like, I don't like what you're doing, I don't like you, like I want to leave, I want out, and she refuses to sign this sort of final set of documents that Jim has put in front of her. Harry hits her like twice, like forehand and backhand, and I can't make up my mind whether the implication is that this is the first time he's ever done that, because, you know,
that
most
was
likely,
my thought.
That was my thought as well, because this is probably the first time she's ever defied him, you know, but like, it's regardless of whether or not this is the first time, this is clearly a time that, you know, with that context fresh in her mind of how her father treated her and how Paul treated her, like her, like understanding, I don't deserve this, I deserve better. You know, it's such a monumental moment for her. And she says later, like, when you hit me, that basically all this confusion I felt about all these things that I've been learning, just, it shook everything into place. And I suddenly realized, like, I need to get out, you know? I don't know, it's so incredibly upsetting, but it's so well done. And yeah, that whole final scene is just like, I mean, it's multiple scenes, because it's like they have that argument, he hits her, she signs the documents, she leaves. They have that moment where they're like arguing, and then the maid comes in and they stop, and then the maid like leaves the room, and then they start arguing again. But then she's out all night. She goes to see Paul. Harry's like worried about her again with him. Like, he certainly thinks he loves her, although what he feels for her, I think we can all agree, is not actually love. He's like, what if she's like dead in a ditch somewhere? And they're like, his henchman's like, you'd hear. Oh. But then Billy and Paul come back, and they have this whole plan to sneak into Harry's room and retrieve the documents, but Harry's waiting up for them. So Billy like really takes charge. She's just like, all right, great, I'm going to talk to Harry. Good night, Paul. And like gives him the opportunity to then sneak into Harry's room while she distracts him. And it's just this long, kind of intense, but I think very well done scene where Harry and Billy are talking, and Billy's like, I'm leaving you. Like, you've made everything, I now understand everything, and I don't want this, and I'm getting out. And then Paul, like, he retrieves the documents and mails them off, and then he comes back, and then Harry is trying to threaten Paul. And, you know, Paul is just kind of cool as a cucumber. I love that moment where he's like, here, let me bribe you to, like, you know, not do what you're doing. And Paul's like, I can't do that. My girl wouldn't like it. And Billy's like, I certainly wouldn't. It's so cute. But yeah, he's like, Harry's trying to bribe Paul. He threatens Paul. He had like at one point like physically attacks Paul, and everyone else is like, you can't do that. Like,
Yeah.
say that muscle stuff is the thing of the past. So anyway, yeah. Any final thoughts on that whole last scene and their kind of confrontation?
I think it was just nice for me to see, because I don't know if I've established this. I really hate the character of Harry. Like, he sucks. I don't like him at all.
Really? He's such a sweet and pleasant guy.
He makes me very angry. So I really enjoyed kind of seeing him get his just desserts, you know? I enjoyed seeing everyone kind of turn their backs on him in that immediate moment, and him having this realization of just, oh, I lost, you know? Because kind of similar to what you just said, everyone else kind of recognizes what's happening, of like, dude, it's over, you know? But he's like, oh, well, what if I bribe him? What if I threaten him? What if I talk to my lawyer? What if and everyone's like, dude, it's over. There's nothing you can do. And so just seeing how much he was fighting that truth, and how long it took him to accept it, but eventually he just was so defeated, and everyone else was like, well, you know, nice knowing you.
Yep.
It's like, we're gonna leave now. There's nothing we can do about it.
I love that final sort of power play that Billy does, where they're going to leave and the henchman's blocking the door, and he looks to Harry and he's like, is it all right? Like, you know, to let him out. And then Billy goes, do it, I'm telling you, in Harry's voice.
Yep.
And then he just like unquestioningly opens the door.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that, like I said, there, you know, this movie just, a lot of things dragged on too long for me, and I would have enjoyed it a lot more if it was shorter. And so this final sequence I did really like a lot. I feel like the way the blocking worked was great. The writing was great. The way that all of this was paced and all of that. I thought this particular final, you know, confrontation was very, very good. But yeah, I mean, it was cool to have all these people in the same room with everything kind of coming to a head. So it was a very good ending to this movie. Sometimes I watch movies from this time period and it's like the end comes up on the screen and I'm like, wait, what? Like, that was super abrupt. What is happening? Whereas it was still abrupt in this movie, because that's just kind of how these movies are. But it also felt like this movie reached a satisfying conclusion where I was like, okay, it's time for this to be over. And it felt like, I don't know, it was a good final act to the story.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's pretty much all I had. So if there's nothing else, we can move on. So let's talk about the Oscars. So this movie was nominated for 5 Oscars. It won for Best Actress. The other Oscars it was nominated for were Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Black and White Costumes. Now, Best Actress, the reason that I had brought that up is the primary reason that this movie is remembered today is because the other competitors for this award were Bette Davis in All About Eve and Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard. So
so I was basically right.
Yeah, you were not far off.
I was thinking that it was this year, but in my brain, I was thinking that Joan Crawford was the actress in Sunset Boulevard, which she isn't. But
right, yes. Yeah, so you were not too wrong. And then Anne Baxter was also nominated for All About Eve in this category. So basically, this was a huge upset. Like, this is an up-and-coming actress who not many people had heard of if you hadn't seen Born Yesterday on screen. And she's going up against these two, you know, legends of the screen, Bette Davis and Gloria Swanson, in 2 extremely critically acclaimed films that, like, those performances obviously have held up today. And there's some speculation that it's possible because those were two incredible legendary actresses doing dramatic performances, they may have sort of canceled each other out, which may have allowed Judy Holliday.
I think I also said Billie Holiday at some point in this podcast.
The character is Billie Dawn, the actress is Judy Holliday. Yeah, so that might have allowed Judy Holliday to win. My take on this is I really love this win because I love this performance. Obviously, I adore Bette Davis and Gloria Swanson's performance, and it is sad that Gloria Swanson never won an Oscar. Bette Davis won a couple Oscars, but Gloria Swanson never did. But to me, those movies have really stood the test of time, and those performances are so central within those movies. They've received such acclaim, and comedic performances are so rarely celebrated. And Judy Holliday, I mean, she had such a sadly shortened career. She wasn't often given the roles that would allow her to showcase her talents. I love the fact that she was able to get this incredible award and be remembered for what I think is truly an exceptional performance. I'm not going to say like it's better than the other two because they're such different movies. Like, how do you compare, All About Eve to Born Yesterday or to Sunset Boulevard? Like, they're so different. But for me, I really love the fact that she won this award because I think it's a performance that's worth remembering. So anyway, that's my hot take about this Oscars. Yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I mean, I'm always here for the underdog. I mean, even in Oscars nowadays, there's certain years where, whether it's an actor or a director, I'm like, okay, Steven Spielberg, I love you. You're great. But like, could you deserve to win this? Yes. But also, what about this other person who did a phenomenal job, but hasn't received any recognition because they're new on the scene and da-da-da. So I'm definitely someone who, when it comes to the Oscars anyway, I'm like, veterans are great, but also the people who deserve to win, like, give them the Oscar. And obviously I agree with you that I think in this particular year, no performance was better than the other, but I don't know. I think it's cool that she kind of came out of nowhere, because I think Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve, people would still know about these movies today, regardless of whether or not they won Oscars. Whereas this film, maybe if she hadn't won, people wouldn't watch it as much. I don't know. I mean, it was still nominated for Best Picture and things like that, but I don't know. I'm not upset about it, but maybe if I'd been alive at that time, I would be upset about it. But from this perspective, 70 years later, or however long it is, like, I'm fine with it. I think it's cool. And her performance is really great in this movie. It's a really good performance.
Yeah. Great. All right. So in terms of sort of talking about the critical response to this movie, so it was well reviewed at the time. I was not able to find a score for it on Metacritic. Metacritic just straight up.
That's so weird.
I could not find this movie at all, which is strange. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 97%, which is...
Wow, that is very high.
Yeah.
I would not expect a 97 for this.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a huge amount of reviews for this film. And actually, as I was looking for quotes from critics about this film, I found it surprisingly difficult to find anything. I think a lot of, older reviews of it are not up on the internet right now. And not a whole lot of people are reviewing this film now. I found a few, like, classic movie blogs, some of which, like, or just like movie blogs that talk about this film, but I found some that I was like, have you seen an old movie before? Like, you clearly have no idea what you're talking about.
Where's the color? Why is this movie in black and white?
I don't understand. It's not that far off, honestly. Anyway, I was able to pull these two quotes. So the first is by a writer named Jeff Andrew for the magazine Time Out. And he writes, "A very simple idea, but enlivened by a sharp, witty script and by Kukor's effortless handling of the brilliant performances. Especially fine are Holliday as the dumb blonde who makes good, and Crawford as the confused sugar daddy." Not exactly how I would describe him, but confused sugar daddy, nowhere more so than in the marvelous scene where her mindless singing disturbs his concentration over a game of gin rummy. Yep. And then I found this review from Cleveland.com, which I couldn't find the actual name of the writer, but whoever this person is, they wrote, "The relationships remain the focal point of Born Yesterday. In fact, though often referred to as a comedy, the film is far more serious-minded than that genre characterization would imply. Harry's behavior is downright despicable, extending beyond psychological abuse into physical as well. Many male viewers, no matter how tempted they may be to simply laugh it off, may find themselves confronted by attitudes similar to their own. Harry's abuse rings true over 60 years later, no matter how chaste we may believe Hollywood product from that era to generally be."
How many men are watching this movie and are tempted to simply laugh it off?
I know.
I don't know. Who are those people?
I know.
That's an
also,
issue.
The idea of like, no matter how chaste we may believe Hollywood product from that era to generally, I feel like that means you haven't seen a whole lot of films from this era. But I do think the central point of like, you know, Harry's characterization and his manipulation and abuse and the way that he, you know, bullies people and bosses them around, this remains relevant to our time. And this is, you know, this is worth watching today because of the way that it speaks, you know, even though it's from this other time with a very different attitude toward the United States government, there are things about this film that I think still speak into today. So anyway. All right, so final thoughts. Yeah, I do love this movie. I love revisiting it. Like I've said, it's sort of I think it remains relevant in certain ways while also being in many ways a time capsule of a very different era. But I think an era, you know, and an attitude toward the world that is helpful to see today as kind of a, you know, here's a different perspective and here's a sort of, you know, here's a glorification of the idea of educating yourself, of learning, of thinking critically about your circumstances, of, you know, taking a moral look at where you are and what you're allowing your life to mean and who you're enabling, and making changes if you're not comfortable with where you are. And it, you know, creates this picture of a certain particularly male archetype that is extremely relevant to today's world. And again, I just think Judy Holliday's performance is magical, and I wish she'd had a better career, but I love the fact that we have this record of her talents. So yeah, just my final thoughts on the movie. Anything for you that you think will stick with you about this movie?
Honestly, not really. I think that this is just a movie where, again, it's just not for me. I don't regret that I watched it, but at the same time, I probably won't revisit this. But yeah, I'm glad we were able to talk about it so that I could hear your thoughts and help me kind of flesh out the things that I do appreciate about this movie a little bit more. But that being said, like, this movie's fine, you know? It's fine. There's things about it that I really like, and there's things about it that I'm just kind of indifferent about. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Bye.
What was that? Well, thanks everybody for listening. Bye.
I don't know.
Like, where did we just travel to?
I don't know. All right.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye. Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpicpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like this show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Until next time.